bargaining entails give and take. Organized private sector then made a submission to say that, well, the economic environment is not favorable, especially the cost of doing business. They use diesel, they pay high taxes, and therefore they are proposing is that let Labour please consider the fact that 30,000 will be what everybody can pay. And therefore, through a motion, unanimously, that was adopted by Labour, looking at the fact that we don't want anybody to be retrenched, and that 30,000 was adopted.
So how did
and therefore,
how did 24,000 come in?
We are not aware of how 24,000 came in, because in the course of the discussion of the committee, every of the constituents came with different figures. As I said, Labour came with 66,500. But in the course of give and take, we mutually agree. And that meeting was adjourned only for committee members to be called upon to sign the final report. That is Chapter 5, because Chapter 5 is where the figure will be inserted. We'll then sign the document on the day that it will be submitted to the president so that his document will be submitted. So to say that there is an ongoing negotiation is bending the fact it's not true. The negotiation has been ended. She's not a member of the committee. I think she's speaking from a third-hand information. I'm speaking as a member of the committee, and I said so on our honor. The chairperson of the committee is still alive.
But she's the director in the Ministry of Trade Union Services and Industrial Relations. Are you privy to these submissions?
I am not. Let me quickly say that from his narratives, it's obvious that the figure that he's presenting here is the understanding between organized labor and organized private sector, not government.
All of those figures, because there are 4 scenarios.
Well, he's saying that there is a figure, there's a consensus. Isn't that what you're saying? And that they have arrived at a figure. And the figure they have arrived at is the one they have with organized private sector. Now, if you are talking about any labor-related matter, we talk about tripartism. 3 parties, government, employers, and workers. In this case, the figure he's presenting represents the figure for the workers as well as the organized private sector, but not government. And so you can't say you have reached a consensus where the tripartism is not represented.
That is not correct. The setting of the minimum wage negotiating committee is a tripartite body, with all the parties present. And the scenario I painted is that everybody was seated when this issue was taken, when this report was presented. So it goes beyond quoting figures of what was previously put on the table. We are past that level. There is a mutual agreement through a formal motion. There was no any counter. Everybody was seated. So this is just an afterthought. And it's a concocted story, which I think the best thing to do, the chairperson is alive. I've said so. She can also shed more light on that, because usually in the process of setting up the committee, the person to be appointed as the chairperson of the tripartite negotiating committee is person of impeccable character. You remember in the 2010-2011, it was Joseph Bolgore. And in this time around, it was the former head of service and former minister that is appointed. And in all of this, because the person ought to be neutral and impartial, she should be able to bring the fact before the public. She is not a member of the committee. And I said, what she's saying is hearsay. As a member of the committee, and there are many members, the decision was taken at a tripartite meeting.
Yeah, but if she was in brief, the ministry has briefed her, yes, she can speak.
Let me quickly say that in the course of his narratives, he mentioned that emotion was taken. Now, the idea of emotion is alien to industrial negotiations. You should have negotiation and have concurrence. It's when you have a concurrence on the figure that it becomes binding on all the parties. Yes, organized labor and the organized private sector seems to have a concurrence on the figure, but government is not agreeable to that figure.
That is not true.
All of those
in all our meetings, after every deliberation, including adjournments, it will be through a formal motion so that it will be recorded. And that was well recorded. Yes, even adjournment of meetings. There should be a formal motion to adjourn a meeting. Yeah. That's the procedure of a meeting. And any meeting that is of that importance, the records need to be straight. And therefore, I can say that this is the process that has been followed. So I think this is diversionary. We should be able to situate all of this. The tripartite discussion should be in the format of a formal meeting. And that is what format that we have adopted throughout the process of the meeting.
You still disagree with that?
I disagree. I disagree because he's talking about a meeting. Yes, emotion is moved in the course of starting or concluding meeting. But when it comes to negotiations, it is concurrence.
Well, no, please. Let me try to address
the agreement.
Let me try to address that.
Yes.
In all the reports, because the committee work in subcommittee reports, the subcommittees bring their report to the plenary. Once a position is adopted, it's usually by a motion.
I like that.
That had been the process. All the former committee, let me tell you also that the main report is ready. It was adopted through a motion. The draft bill is ready. It was adopted through a motion. And therefore, this last one that deals with the figure was also adopted through a motion. So this had been the process that was adopted by the committee to do this assignment. So there is nothing faulty about that. And we cannot change the rule at the end of the game.
If government is aware of all of this, first of all, do you also agree now that there was indeed a tripartite meeting? It wasn't just the OPS and Labour that agreed on that. Is that your view now, having heard this explanation?
No. That's not my view. They have been having meetings, tripartite meetings with government, that's including employers and organized labor. But my disagreement is regarding the issue of having reached a consensus on the figure that will apply as Nigerian national minimum wage. There's no consensus yet on that.
But, you know, these meetings, several meetings, first of all, there are many who ask, because we know about the National Labour Advisory Council, and that cannot be convened without the ministry or federal government, because ministry will represent federal government in that meeting. And so when that is convened, you have all those other sectors, Ministry of Labour, trade unions, employers, and then I think the Salaries and Wages Commission, who will be there as an advisory. So if that meeting is convened and they agree on something, you can't say that there's only 2 or 3 people, can you?
To start with, the National Labour Advisory Council hasn't sat for about 4 or 5 years.
Why?
Why? Because it takes the three players in industrial relations to ensure that that happens. And so the minister is just trying to ensure that we get the council constituted again for the purpose of negotiating issues relating to labor. But for this purpose of minimum wage, it has been a tripartite, and that is in tandem with the ILO principle.
So does that mean that this NLAC cannot deliberate on issues such as minimum wage?
They can, but to the extent that at the commencement of this process, we didn't have a body constituted by the tripartite. So they had to go the way of just getting representative from organized labor, organized private sector, and then government.
So, comrade, why
that is not true. It's not correct. Convention 131 of the ILO that deals with the issue of minimum wage have provided a clear provision on how the tripartite body should be set up. So it's quite distinct and different from the National Labour Advisory Council. The National Labour Advisory Council is supposed to be a statutory body that will continuously provide a platform for social dialogue on different issues in the industrial relation menu. And therefore, there are 2 different bodies.
Doesn't it include the minimum wage?
No, for 2 different issues. The minimum wage specifically has a law that is guiding it.
That's our minimum wage law?
Yes, and from time immemorial, we have used that. I try to remind you of the Bulgari Committee, which was also a tripartite committee, which have membership drawn from the tripartite body, solely for the purpose of the minimum wage, because it's a specialized platform to discuss issue of minimum wage. And that had been the historical context of discussing the minimum wage. So the Labour Advisory Council, I think the last time we met was actually, I think, around 2013 or so, 13. I remembered in the last dispensation. There was a meeting, it was well constituted. I think what we were told is that it's constraint of form, because we have made that severally. Organized labor have demanded that it's also in tandem with ILO convention that there should be a statutory tripartite consultative body to discuss issues relating to industrial relation. And we have demanded that severally. And even of recent, our organs have tried to demand of that we must put this body in place because it's sacrosanct and it's also legal. In fact, it has international connotation because it's related to a co-ILO convention. I think it's Convention 141 about tripartite consultation. So I think if that body is in place, we will have progressively try to also discuss some of these issues. Let me also remind us, I think Shenikon Committee on actually consolidation of emolument in the public sector, in fact, recommended for that there should be that platform at every point in time to actually minimize the issue of industrial disputes in core public service and in different sectors. And therefore, I think it's timely and is even overdue for this committee to be constituted.
The thing is, the National Labour Advisory Council can look into any labor-related issues, including minimum wage. So for you to say, and well, the composition is tripartite, and it's in tandem with the ILO Convention 131 and Convention 26 on the machinery for determining minimum wage. So I find it very interesting that on one hand, you are saying that they cannot negotiate minimum wage. On the other hand, you said their body should be put in place.
No, it's not true. Let me put it into context. We have had the Labour Advisory Council in place.
Just a minute. But I need to find out. It has never been used to negotiate minimum wage, because minimum wage is a different issue altogether. So and therefore, the provision of the Convention 131 is also specific about how we drive the process of minimum wage. Okay, so we know the importance of this council. Why isn't government bringing it up?
They're in the process.
I mean, how many? Since 2013.
It's taking a while, yes. I agree. But Honorable Minister is in the process of putting together.
What does it take to put it together?
Well, you consult the tripartite and have them nominate people. I think the law stipulates the law stipulates the number that they're supposed to nominate from the different sectors. All
right, so what we'll do is we'll go to break, but we'll come back and take a look at possible solutions, including the processes that could be explored to ensure that this is sorted. Because if we keep going back and forth as to who said what, that won't sort it out. That's not what the people want. So we'll take a look at that when we'll come back in a moment. Join us again.
Thank you.